Hey everyone, so AMD released 21.7.2 the other day. They've added support for Chernobylite, added Vulkan support, so basically enhancing the Vulkan API, fixed issues to do with the software advisor, but this software advisor is always going to be flawed until they add more functionality to it. And what I mean by that is, if a game is CPU or GPU bound, is highly dependent on the resolution and settings you run. So if you're running competitive settings aiming for a high refresh rate, which also takes into account the monitor, or you're running ultra settings which max out the GPU, the CPU requirement and hardware advice is going to change. And until they add a button that lets you choose competitive or visual or ultra best graphics, that advisor is going to be inaccurate, and that's just the way it is. So anyway, hopefully they can improve that functionality. Otherwise, I feel like it's a waste of resources to keep working on it. But it is helpful for some less tech savvy users. And anyway, they fixed blue and black screen issues on mobile systems with enhanced sign-in, and an issue with security when you've got core isolation enabled. There was a blue or black screen bug. They fixed that. And RE Village application timeout TDR hang with Radeon VII. Now, I experienced this on my 6000 series GPU, so I hope that the fix would carry over to that as well, because they never mentioned 6000 being affected. And as for known issues, driver timeouts with 500 series graphics cards, OBS, difficulties ending recording with OBS on HEVC, codec with the 6800 XT specifically, PUBG multiple displays, Horizon Zero Dawn. Now there's a workaround for this one. Horizon Zero Dawn driver timeout or game crash on the 6700 XT. I experienced this, and you can work around it by messing with your TDR delay settings or disabling TDR within the registry. So you can just Google TDR delay game crashes, and you'll be able to find a thread where someone will explain how to do it. But I'm not going to go through that in a driver test video. So enhanced sync may cause black screens, so I don't use it. That's why I keep all the syncing options off, just to avoid these kinds of issues. And performance metrics may report wrong memory clock values, and this just seems to be an ongoing issue from RDNA to RDNA2, or all RDNA with the memory clocks. And I think it's to do with the offsets, because from GPU to GPU for the memory stability, I don't know if this is controller based or the way that they tune the GPUs, but you can have two GPUs with the same basic specs, same model, and they can have a slightly different offset under, if I go under here, like for example, it's supposed to be 2000 megahertz under load, and if I put it under a light load, my previous Heaven run crashed because I had it running when I started recording. It should be 2000, but under load it's showing 1990, so my offset is 10 megahertz, and I think that's why between all the different cards they'll have different offsets. It's supposed to be the same basic speed, but because of that slight offset you'll get incorrect values. Not a big deal, but I've seen people report crazy values, so it's like reading it completely wrong. Might be built into the GPU itself, which is why they still haven't fixed it, I think. So anyway, enough of that. I'm going to just get into my normal testing. One thing I will make everyone aware of, especially for the new people, is that I run my own profile that I carry between driver updates. And when I do my driver update, I install over the top. I don't do the factory reset, because if you factory reset, all your custom settings get reset. Anything you've disabled, which is all these fancy features here that I keep disabled under the graphics tab, these can cause strange performance, basically. And I want the performance to be consistent between updates. So I keep all of this stuff off, and doing a reset will randomly re-enable stuff, and hotkeys will be turned back on, back to default if you do that. So if you're upgrading from a different GPU, that's when I would say the factory reset is important, and you should even run display driver uninstaller before you install your new drivers. But for going from driver to driver on the same GPU, just installing over the top I found to be reliable, as long as you have like a nice fan curve that you can, and your tune settings that you can just load on a profile. So save profile there after you've tuned it, and then between driver updates I have to reload the profile, because that will get reset even when you install over the top. You have to re-enable your tuning profiles. And one more thing, if anyone's been doing undervolting on the 6700 XT, if you're stable in all your games except for one, and that game is like a less intensive title, it can be due to the way the curve works. We can't access the middle and the lower range of the voltage curve anymore, and that means if you're unstable at middle or lower frequencies, you can't adjust that voltage and give it a bump without enabling the entire voltage. Like there might be a registry way to do it, or a BIOS hack method, but basically the way to fix that instability is to just bump your undervolt up a bit. So I was stable in all the AAA titles and more intensive titles, but in Path of Exile specifically, I was getting random crashes, and that was at 1120 MV. Bumping it to 1150 completely eliminated those random crashes. I actually originally bumped it from 1120 to 1130, but I was still getting the odd crash. It was just really intermittent, so it was like happening once every few days rather than once every session. So I had to go all the way up to 1150 to get that rock solid stability. So for recording and all that, it was fine. It just wasn't okay for Path of Exile that runs at like under 2000 megahertz for the core. So anyway, that out of the way, I'll just get into the testing. One more bug is the global graphics and the game-specific graphics profiles are still broken. And what I mean by that is if you set multi-sampling in here, in the game-specific profile, but your global profile is on adaptive multi-sampling or super sampling, the game-specific profile will get ignored and the game will follow global no matter what you do in the game-specific. So I'll just really quickly demonstrate this because this bugs me a lot. If I set Unigine Heaven to super sampling, which runs at about 50 FPS when it's working, and I have the global graphics on multi-sampling, which runs around 120 FPS, and then I run the benchmark, it's going to run at 120 FPS following global. It won't follow super sampling set in the game-specific profile. So if anyone can replicate this and prove it that it's also happening on their systems, submit a bug report in the top right. As you can see here, there's a bug report tool. Put in the details, graphics software, incorrect functionality, select Radeon software and incorrect software functionality, and report a bug, because the more people report this, the quicker it'll get picked up by AMD and they'll fix it. So yeah, just giving that bit of advice here, but I'm just going to demonstrate the issue real quick. You'll see here at the main screen, or when I first run the benchmark button in this opening area, it's at 114 FPS. When I click the run benchmark, if you just go back to the main menu, like not running the benchmark tool, the opening scene with the rock pavement, got to go back to it, sorry, where it is. The opening scene with the rocky pavement bit, just after this bit here, this should be running at like 50 FPS on super sampling, and it's not following the game-specific profile at all, it's following global. And the weird thing is, this is another weird thing, if I go into the game-specific profile and I change it, the software can detect I've changed the game-specific profile and that the game's running, but it's not actually going to do anything. So just an example, I'll set to multi-sampling, or adaptive should run around 114 FPS, but multi-sampling runs around 115 to 120 in that intro scene. If I set it to multi-sampling, it tells me game restart required, and it actually can tell that I've changed something. And that won't go away until I fully close both of these applications, right? Both of these tools, including the launcher. It detects the launcher as well. But then when I run it again, or if I'll just go back in here and change something else. I'll go into global gaming profiles, and I'll change this to super sampling, which will tank the FPS. So now this is set on super sampling. I'm not even running any games. Why is it game restart required? Current game, is anything actually running? Wait, I'll just make sure that Heaven hasn't bugged out on me. Oh, nothing's running. Bit weird. But if I go into Heaven, it's set on multi-sampling. This should be giving me roughly the same performance I was just getting. And global is on super sampling, which should not be affecting Heaven at all. So that's 50 FPS performance. And now I'll run Heaven again. And you'll see it running at 50 FPS, ignoring the game-specific profile. I just want this bug needs to get out there because it is kind of game-breaking. If you're thinking something's not working properly, your GPU could be underperforming, and your profiles are just messed up. Like you've got your global graphics, and then you're thinking the game specific's controlling it, and it's not. You can see here 50 FPS. That is not following the game-specific profile at all. It's following the global graphics profile. So yeah, in short, the game-specific profiles are broken. So I have it set on multi-sampling here. That should be 120 FPS. So anyway, let's hop out of that for a second. And I'll close this stuff. super sampling is pretty intensive. So basically, yeah, I just ignore the game-specific profiles now, and that was why I ran into an issue with 21.6. I think that might be when the bug first appeared, because I wasn't having any issues with Heaven performance on 21.5. You can see 146, but I also was not specifically tweaking the game-specific profiles as much as I am now. I was using the global on adaptive, but yeah, I just noticed the issue in 21.6, and I checked my profiles, and it turns out it was this weird profile bug where the specific profile wasn't working. So 113 is on adaptive AA. And the other weird thing is if I go into game-specific profiles real quick, and you actually mouse over the tooltip for AA method, it says only affects DirectX 9 applications. And this entire time with these testings I've just shown you, I've been using DirectX 11 API. So I don't even know, the tooltip's broken, or maybe it only applies, it doesn't make sense, so they need to fix that. It affects all APIs as far as I can tell. So yeah, just be aware of that. So we're going to be running multi-sampling for these tests, and the multi-sampling test, when Heaven is running as it should, with the default AA method, should match up with 21.5.2 before I realized there was a bug. Like, I've added info here to show that the bug was there, but in 21.5.2 it was running multi-sampling just fine. So maybe I just wasn't looking at the profile specifically, but you can see here 146 should be roughly what we get with recording on and ultra extreme tessellation 8 times AA. So yeah, that's what we're expecting. And we'll just run that now. So just double check these global profile. It is on, super sampling, multi-sampling. That's what we want. And this, I'll just quickly explain. If you put on AMD optimized, if AMD know there's an issue with high tessellation levels that are unnecessary, for example, in Witcher 3 and Hairworks, the default Hairworks uses like times 64 tessellation level, which is fine with most newer GPUs, but on the older AMD GPUs with weaker tessellation, it would tank performance, but it ran good on NVIDIA, so it was kind of like an NVIDIA biased tessellation level. And AMD optimized basically caps the frame rate, the tessellation level, to stop that performance hit in the titles they know about. So for Witcher, I think it caps it at times 16, which is here, but you can see it can go all the way up to times 64. So if you want to do it manually, you can actually just cap it to times 16. That'll do it for all applications. And if you're running particularly newer titles that are just using tessellation as standard now, if you're worried that maybe there's some games that are still biasing towards NVIDIA and putting really high tessellation levels that don't give any visual improvement, you can just cap it to 16 or even times 8 or times 4, depending on the title. I've seen you can even get like performance boosts where there's literally no visual difference that you can easily perceive. So, you could run it times 4 and just get that tiny bit more performance. On RDNA, though, tessellation is actually on par with NVIDIA, if not stronger, unless RTX is involved. So when RTX is involved, RTX will use the tessellation level and enhance. The RTX will basically have more work to do with higher tessellation levels. And this seems to run better on NVIDIA because they've got the RTX, the more, what are they called? Not advanced, but more refined RT cores, because they've had more iterations of it with 20 series and 30 series than AMD. But basically, when RTX is involved, the tessellation level can indirectly hurt performance on AMD, even though the AMD tessellation is on par with RDNA. It's because the RTX performance is not on par. So if you're testing RTX titles with AMD, set this a bit lower. You could have it on times 4 or times 2, and you might get a performance improvement with RTX on. But I wouldn't turn it off, though. It just depends on your preference. You could try it off, but yeah, then your tessellation will obviously be disabled, which will remove that effect. So yeah, if in doubt, AMD optimized is pretty safe. But if you're running very new titles that haven't had any game-specific driver updates, then override would be the other method you could use. So I think AMD optimized is fairly safe at this point, though, because unless I'm testing a very, very new title that has never had any driver update with the game mentioned, they've already optimized Chernobylite, for example. So if I look in the driver updates, it mentions support for Chernobylite. They would have optimized the tessellation mode already for that game. So we'll just leave that how it is. And yeah, multi-sampling. So I'll get into the testing now, and at the end of the testing, I've actually dropped the other games because my videos take a bit too long. Everything's going to be timestamped in the comments below for the people that don't have time to listen to me rambling on. But basically, I'm just going to do Heaven and Superposition, and then a little bit of Chernobylite FSR testing at the end, just to throw that in there as a bonus. But I'm not going to be doing like full-on benchmarking. Just a quick test to show you guys what FSR is about, and you can actually see the very nice performance boost it gives. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys, and enjoy the benchmarks and stability test. Cheers. So yeah, as you can see, performance is up. It is actually improved over previous drivers. So the one with the multi-sampling that I know was properly working should have been 21.5.2, and we can see here everything is up. Yeah, even the minimum. So yeah, the max is really high too, so that's nice to see. And yeah, that's just to, I just wanted to get over, like, thoroughly explain that, because I did get this weird performance drop in 21.6. I thought it was built into the drivers, like a driver bug, and it is a driver bug, but it's a profile bug. It's just kind of weird. So yeah, as long as you're aware of that, you can make sure that your global profile is what you're using for tuning your games, and just ignore the game profiles until they fix it. So you can see here it was 8 times AA windowed Ultra Extreme Tessellation, and I had the tessellation on AMD optimized just to make that very clear for everyone. And I always had it on AMD optimized in previous tests when I was testing like 21.5.2 and such. And max. And this was recording on too, so it would be a little bit higher with it off. Like maybe it would be up at 165. Because this benchmark in particular tends to be very sensitive to background processes. Like media player is fine, but if I was like running Brave browser open or Google Chrome, etc., that can really hurt the performance. And now we'll go into superposition before Chernobylite testing. let's see here on 21. So we're using 21.5. I'll link these in the comments below just so you can see the older driver scores. But 21.5.2 was before the 21.6, which was the bigger change, adding in where they added in what's it called? They also added in this switch here. It's kind of weird because the switch is no, it's under performance. It's not weird. Never mind. Smart access memory. They added that switch in with 21.6, and that's also where I had the weird profile bug occurring. But 21.5.2 was 146 and 68 FPS for superposition, 4K optimized with ReLive recording on at the same settings, and it looks like it is within margin of error, like basically the same. So even the minimum is like within a decimal of performance. And yeah, within 1 FPS. So very consistent, and it looks like from 21.5.2, and I'm assuming 21.6, providing you're using the right profiles, all the way to 21.7 should be all safe to use, like performance-wise. And stability-wise, I wasn't getting any crashes on any of these that weren't caused by myself, like with regards to my undervolt and specific game that I'm running. But in terms of general stability for doing any basic tasks or most games, with my undervolt, it was perfectly fine. And then once I addressed the undervolt being a bit low for Path of Exile, it was rock solid. So yeah, that's the main thing to look out for, is make sure your temps are good and check your undervolts. If you're getting any weird behavior, bump your undervolt a little bit to make sure that it's not that. Because one game being stable does not mean all games are stable. So just be aware. We'll just put in these 67.63. And the reason I'm not testing Horizon Zero Dawn and Metro in this one is simply because I'm testing Chernobylite and I don't want it to be a 1.5-hour video. So 81.42, and I might move over to Chernobylite just because it's something newer and it has a built-in benchmark, which is really cool. So, okay, now for Chernobylite, I'm not going to be running the full benchmark. I'm going to explain to you why, and I'm just going to show you what the game runs like. And we're going to use the benchmark up to 26 to 27% because of the way the benchmark works. And the main reasoning behind it is Chernobylite itself, the built-in benchmark is great. Like, it's really stable. The frame times are perfect, like better than other benchmarks I've seen actually. But there's no queue for progression. So I'll just give you an example here. If I go into video settings, these are my settings. I'm going to be testing at ultra wide. 81 field of view is the default, and under advanced, where are they? Advanced, I've set draw distance to max. The default's 100, just so if you want to copy my settings for your own testing. And I've turned off bloom, motion blur, and depth of field. And we're going to run with FSR off for the first run. And I'll show you the reason I don't do a full run. When I run this, you can run it from either. It's nice. They've added the benchmark in both video and advanced. So if you're specifically tweaking one thing, I'll just show you real quick. Now this benchmark, the reason you don't need to run it all the way through is because not only do you have no frame progression information on the screen, like there is no option to turn on frame information. I don't know how long the benchmark actually runs because I could not sit through the whole thing. It was too long. Basically, this is the most intensive part out in the open with the background. Like you'll see something further off in the distance, but this is the intensive part of the benchmark. You can see it's running around 74 FPS, 72. The update rates are slightly different for Afterburner and the benchmark tools, so you might notice a slight discrepancy, but it's just because they're polling at slightly different rates. But basically, this intro scene in the forest is already intensive to give you an idea of worst case scenario performance. As it gets further into the benchmark, and the benchmark goes for like really long, it'll get into indoor scenes where the FPS jumps by like 20 FPS. It goes up the further in you go. So if you're just testing how well your GPU can perform, you can already get a good idea from the first 30 seconds rather than waiting the whole, I don't know how long it goes. But basically, the way we can tell of how far to test is around about this part is as far as is worth going. The FPS drops a little bit, and just thereafter we pass that sign is as far as you need to go. Like, I don't think it's worth going in any deeper. And when you hit escape is when you'll know how far you've gone into the benchmark. So if I hit escape right now, it's already ended the benchmark. It'll keep going through the scene, but we were at 30% when I turned that off. And you can see the settings I was running and the minimum 1% max. Basically, that minimum and the 1% happened just after the sign we passed before I ended the benchmark. there's like a little warning, radiation sign that pops up in the center of the screen. So that's how we're going to test. Instead of going all the way into the buildings where it goes up to like 90 FPS, there's no point of that. Like you'll see, it'll start going into buildings. Rather than waste your time, it's nice. The nice part, even though we don't have progression, is we can just end it at 26% and get a good idea of worst case scenario performance. And we can also test FSR this way too. So if you want to copy my method, end it at 26%, 27%, and you'll already have a good idea of how well your system will perform it. There's a error in the average spell check. Anyway, it is translated from Russian or German. And one other thing I wanted to share, if you're thinking about this game in the audio options, or the game options, sorry, the default is Russian and the English is not done by Russians. So if you don't like English VO, I would stick to Russian and just put the text to English. So that's the default this way. So anyway, we'll get into the testing. We're going to do a run up to about 26% after that sign I was explaining. And with FSR off, then we're going to do a run with FSR on. And you'll get to see if there's a visual difference. And yeah, just get a good idea of how it's going. And it's weird, the FPS looks capped to 105 here in the menu. I don't believe I have any FPS cap set. Let me check. Make sure there's no kind of... I've got 105 here, but... setting that to 0 make a difference? Oh, it does a little bit. For the menu, though, that wasn't actually working in the tool. I've got a hotkey that should disable the FPS cap. It's not working for some weird reason. I've got a stop button. There we go. But yeah, because the game's actually running at like 60 FPS, it doesn't matter. It's not running at 100 FPS when I'm doing the benchmark. So the FPS cap wasn't really affecting anything, apart from the menu frame rate. And you can see, look, one other thing I will show you with these 6000 series GPUs, look at the power consumption at the menu, right? So if you're AFK, you've escaped out of your game, and you're letting the menu run uncapped, you're going to be using 158 watts of power. If I cap it to 105 with my hotkey, 80 watts. That is significant. That is 70 watts difference from sitting at the menu. So if you're conscious about your power consumption, wasting power, and making your power bills get big, cap your FPS, especially if it's uncapped on menus for whatever game you're playing, and just cap it to closer to your refresh rate rather than running uncapped to save a bit of power. So yeah, I'll uncap it again and see how high it goes. Just a waste of power, really. And the game never runs at 100 FPS in the intensive scenes anyway, so it's kind of a waste. I'll leave it uncapped for this testing just so you can see if there's a difference, and I'll just do this quick. We're going to do FSR all the way through to performance, just so you can see what it's like. And yeah, I wasn't intending to do this because this is not scripted. This is impromptu, I'm just doing this on the spot. So here we go. I'll just turn my mic off. So yeah, you can see that was 27%. Straight after that sign, there's a little bit of an FPS drop, and you can see we've already got a 1% of 58 and a minimum of 59, which is exactly what I had when I stopped it before, because that's like basically the most intensive part at the intro, rather than running 100%. I will do 100% run at the very end of this video, just for the people that are curious to see what the whole benchmark looks like, but it does go very, very long, so that's why I don't even want to bother running it for testing. So we'll put a little notepad up. I just want to make this very easy for anyone else to replicate, like, so you're not like getting stressed trying to get too technical with tables and charts and stuff. Just using notepad is good enough. It'll do the job. Now it's weird. The minimum's not really that important because the 1% low is where you're going to see stutter and FPS drops. I don't even know what minimum is for anymore. Like, what's the purpose after 1% low started to get popularized? But they're close anyway. It shows that the engine is running well at the very least. And you're going to get to see some sweet FSR performance in a minute. And as well, you can see that running the FPS uncapped, when your game's not going to hit that, you're just wasting power at the menu, basically. Yeah, that's basically it. So yeah, you can see that was a considerable performance boost. I still think a 105 FPS cap would be applicable or good to run for these settings and this resolution with my specific setup, because even though it peaked over 105, the average was still under 100, and the minimums are what matter. So we're well under 100 for that, but a significant boost from FSR off. I'll just punch those in. And then we'll continue with the testing. that was pretty impressive, to be honest. I am noticing a slight visual degradation, like the distant terrain and foliage. So quality would probably be my limit. You can see it's got FSR quality on the end of the test at the bottom there. And you can see just the foliage starts to get blurry and Pascal looking. So that's kind of the reason I wouldn't go any lower than that, at least with these settings on Ultra 3440 by 1440. If you're sitting further back from the screen though, or if you're playing like, different environment, it might be all right. But yeah. Anyway, we'll test the lower modes anyway, just to see what it's like. Looking real blurry. So yeah, as you can see, a very significant boost, but again, we got that huge quality loss, and it ends up turning into like an oil painting at under quality mode, basically. Even quality is not that great. I would run Ultra Quality because that is a very nice jump in performance, and you get the minimums above 60. So yeah, it is very nice just to have that kind of performance. Indoors will probably be around 100 FPS just because the FPS does jump up quite significantly. On FSR off, when you go from outdoors to indoors, it goes up to about 90 FPS, just for an example. So anyway, now we'll go into, I will run the full benchmark at the end, but first I'll show you one more thing. There is a free play option where we can also test FSR, and this is more for the static comparison I wanted to give you guys real quick. Moscow Eye is from the benchmark, the intro of the benchmark. We'll set it to sunny. We don't want any events. You can actually turn, like, this free play mode, you can actually turn all weapons and perks on if you want to actually do like a free roam type of thing. But we're just testing here, so we don't need weapons. And I don't want to spoil too much, like how the guns work and stuff. I'll save that for a Chernobylite specific video rather than a benchmark video. Because then we're going to be like testing the game mechanics and stuff. So it'll get too much into it. So from the benchmark, it actually starts on this road. Wait, is it this road or the other way? No, it's this way. I was able to find roughly the spot. Where did I run? So this is on FSR Performance, by the way. That's why it looks horrible. Somewhere around here. I can't remember how far I ran. But basically, I was able to find the same spot. There we go. That way. This road. How far did I run last time? It's actually stuttering a little bit because I first loaded into this free roam map. There is a little bit of loading stutter when you first load into a game. If you haven't played that area before, but then afterwards it smooths out. So I guess that's just preloading or loading bugs that they'll iron out as you get further into it. I need to find this spot. Around here somewhere. I'm lost. Here. Somewhere here. Might not be exactly the same. There is a spot. Like, I was able to find it. I was able to find the benchmark scene, but I'm lost now. Like, you see the tower and stuff over there? It might have even been further back. This part up here somewhere. Getting confused. There's the house.